to my kitchen. And I'm really happy that you've joined today. This is, I think, Jason is the 20th, is on week 20 now. So we officially on a 5-month mark that I've been running this. Every week, a different speaker. I've spoken a couple of times. I'm going to pop in every few weeks and just give you a couple of chapters from my story and various stories. But this evening, I've got Jason van Slot, and his story is mind-blowing. It is inspiration beyond, and it's kind of proof that, you know, how you think really matters, and we have a choice of how we navigate life despite what it hands us. But his courage and inspiration is one of the most special stories I've ever heard. So I'm really, really excited. Thank you, Jason, so much for joining. I mean, I literally was introduced to Jason just a few weeks ago. One of the speakers that came on, some of you might have heard Terry Winship, who came on, and she introduced me to Jason, and we had a chat on the phone, and one of the easiest people to listen to, like honestly, we had a 40-minute conversation, just off the bat, so easy, so honest, so humble. So I'm not going to give it all away, but thanks, Jace, and just welcome to my kitchen.
Thank you very much for having me here. Yeah, I know it's Elaine gave me a call this afternoon and said, just like, I know you're a professional speaker, but don't worry about any of the stuff you've been trained with. Just talk from the heart and just let it. It's a conversational talk. So I'm just gonna give you a little bit of a rundown of what cystic fibrosis is. So I was born with cystic fibrosis, which is a life-threatening genetic lung condition. And it causes an accumulation of mucus all over your body. And this makes all your organs be clogged up with mucus. And it affects mainly your lungs and your digestive system. But with your lungs, it's almost like coats your lungs like syrup does with honey. And this is a breeding ground for bacteria, where it grows and it causes recurring chest infections. And this eventually it scars the lungs and it causes permanent lung damage. Also, a side effect of this is that there's inflammation in the lungs, and this inflammation, it tightens and restricts your airways, and it feels like you're breathing through a straw. Currently, there's no cure for it. And I'm 25 years old, and the average life expectancy is 37. And I was growing up, my parents, they never told me much about the condition. Yes, I had it, but they wanted to make sure that I was living a positive mindset where I didn't feel that the disease controlled me. An example of this would be that I was 3 years old, where my dad actually, I was 3 years old, and my dad asked me to handle my sister's toy. And I didn't want to, because I wanted to play with the toy as a kid, like with mine, because I've got a twin sister and we share a lot. And instead of letting me off the hook and saying, you know what, scolding me for not handing the toy, and because I said that I wanted to play with it because I was sick and I couldn't hand it to him. So I made up this excuse around my illness. And he scolded me and he said I was never allowed to use my condition as an excuse again. And this has essentially been the building blocks to how I choose to live my life going forward. And it would have been quite easy for me as a young child to say, why me? Why I have CF and not my twin sister? But I never really asked this question, and never was something that came up for me, because I was growing up with this motto that we have in our family, which is don't give it power. So if you don't give something the power to control you, it can't limit you. And my parents never told me that I was given the life expectancy of 10 years old, and they only did when I was 20, and it kind of slipped out. And it slipped out when a month before I was doing the Cape Epic, which I'll get to later. But when they did tell me that I had this condition that which I knew I had, but I didn't know that it was life-threatening. They made sure that I met someone with a condition who was in their 60s and they had a double lung transplant and they were living a full life. And my parents purposely did this to make sure that I saw that there's life despite this condition with a death sentence over it. And because I found out that my life expectancy was 10 and I was 20 when I found this out. So it was they really wanted me to not feel that this was the end, or I start counting my days or anything like that. So they didn't want me to have this mental block towards the condition. But I found that meeting this guy, his name's Peter, it made me realize that CF, or cystic fibrosis, that it didn't have to be a death sentence. If I didn't give it the power to limit me and control me. I mean, yes, I had it. And yes, people have many challenges that they deal with. And yes, I have challenges with the condition, but it mustn't have me. It mustn't control me. There's the term for someone with cystic fibrosis is a CF sufferer. And personally, I really actually don't like this term at all. I believe you have it, you live with it, you manage it, but you don't suffer from it. And there are risks involved and there are challenges, but you manage it as best possible. And you look forward, okay, this is where we are, how are we going to plan around this and get through it? And this mindset, it really came apparent to me when I was in my final year of schooling and I was talking to a childhood friend, Sasha. And we were speaking about what our goals were for the future and ambitions after matric. And in the conversation, I told them that I'd be taking part in the Cape Epic, which is the toughest mountain biking race on earth. And he turns to me and he said that he completely forgot that I ever had CF. And I realized that very much like that hiding that my dad gave me when he scolded me, that I didn't allow myself, or I didn't perceive myself as someone who suffered from the condition, and I didn't define myself by the condition. But at the same time, I didn't allow other people or one of my friends to perceive me as someone who couldn't do something. And this has very much been the crux of why I wanted to do the Cape Epic. So many of you guys know Table Mountain, and I'm going to use that as a unit of measure just so we can get an understanding of what the Cape Epic is and what it entails. And I'm going to compare it to Table Mountain, the Argus, and the Epic, because most people will know the route of the Argus. So Table Mountain, it's 1,000 meters in elevation. And the Argus cycle tour, it's 100 kilometers, and you go around the peninsula and back to Cape Town via Chapman's Peak. And the total elevation in that race that you cover is 1,000 meters. Then there's the Cape Epic, which is an 8-day race. It's over rock and gravel. You go through soft sand, rivers, and mud. It's extremely rugged. And you cover the distance of an Argus a day for a week, except the total elevation that you do is 16,000 meters, which is twice the height of Everest. And if you were to break that down into what you're covering per day, it's anywhere between 80 to 130 kilometers, and you climb Table Mountain 2,500 to 3,000 times per day. So that's what an average day looks like. Now, imagine doing that. It sounds pretty tough, but doing it with cystic fibrosis is like doing it, but breathing through a straw. The Cape Epic, it's a 2-person race. So you do it with a partner, and I did it with a German triathlete who I met at school. And what we wanted to do with the whole mission of doing the Cape Epic is we wanted to change this negative connotation behind it. Because growing up, it was, all I heard about was that people would want to reach a target life expectancy, and that was their goal. And it was all this negative energy around. I mean, the Cystic Fibrosis Association for South Africa, their slogan is fighting to breathe, which is quite negative. And we actually wanted to change this, and we actually approached them, which they have subsequently done. And they changed their motto to our motto, which was breathing in life. Something a lot more uplifting and looking forward rather than at the negative. It's very ironic because Philip's dad, he is a medical doctor and a cyclist himself. So Philip obviously told him, oh, I'm doing the epic with this guy with cystic fibrosis. And Philip's dad said to him, you're wasting your time. He said, you waste your time even trying to do the Cape Epic because it's impossible for someone with cystic fibrosis to complete the epic. Now, he said that because he had this preconceived idea, and he never met me because, well, he lives in Germany, but he had this preconceived idea because no one had thought of attempting such a huge task like that. And I wanted to change the mentality of setting limits and saying, oh, well, because you have this condition, it's impossible. And rather say, well, yes, it's going to be challenging, but let's get through it and look at the positive and the sky's the limit dream and see what you can do, just reach for the stars. Before we even started the Cape Epic, there was a lot of work that we had behind the scenes as a family with someone with cystic fibrosis. I mean, even just being healthy enough for the 20 years beforehand, that was quite a challenge as well. I was fortunate because I was diagnosed very young. So I was 8 months old when I was diagnosed. And a lot of people, particularly in South Africa, they are misdiagnosed for other respiratory conditions, for TB and malnutrition. And by the time they're actually properly diagnosed, a lot of lung damage has already occurred, and it's too late because you can't recuperate that lung damage, and it's permanent. You've lost that part of your lung. You can never use it again. So growing up, there was a lot of work that my parents did behind the scenes that a normal family wouldn't necessarily think about. So for example, when there's that snot-nosed kid who wants to come play, for her, it would send shivers down her spine because she's thinking of the consequences if I were to get sick. I would then possibly get a lung infection, which reoccurs and goes on and goes on. I end up on IV antibiotics and in hospital, and you can't use that lung function again. So what we did, or what my parents did when I was growing up, or what they would do is they would give me physio. So they would give me percussionary physio on my lungs, which would help loosen this thick mucus that's like syrup that's coating my lungs. And by doing that, it would allow me to cough it up. And they'll do that twice a day. And when I got older, fortunately, I fell in love with sport. And I was able to do a lot more of it myself. So by coughing or exercising, you'd loosen the phlegm by yourself. But obviously, as a child, I wasn't able to do that. What also is interesting to note is that cycling in particular, it very much complements CF and the whole situation of getting that excess mucus out. Because if you think of when you're naturally struggling to breathe or you're choking, you tend to lean over a bit and like try and open your lungs a bit. And that's pretty much the same position as when you're on the bike with your lungs open and you're letting the airflow come in and out. It's also a form of postural drainage to help clear your lungs. There's also some other challenges that one would, or it's from a cycling perspective or sports perspective, that you would glance over. Firstly is because of the condition, I lose 10 times more salt in my sweat, which isn't great for cramping. And it's because salt, you need salt to stop you from cramping. It's part of the system that causes cramping. So I would purposely simulate these situations. And when I was training for the epic, I would go train in the middle of the day in December in 35-degree heat to get used to these situations and experiment with different salt supplements to make sure that I wouldn't cramp because of a lack of salt. And after hot days riding, I'd come back and my skin would be covered with crystallized salts, and I'd look and I would step out into the sun and I'd start like shining and shimmering because the salts are reflecting. Another challenge is that with cystic fibrosis is that the mucus blocks your digestive enzymes. So it blocks your stomach. It stops the enzymes from reaching your stomach, so you don't digest your food properly. And you have to take these artificial enzymes every time you eat. And on a good day with the enzymes, you absorb 25% of what you eat. So a lot of it's not absorbed, and this is why malnutrition is a factor that is often misdiagnosed with the condition, as I spoke about earlier. So because the Cape Epic is an 8-day thing, it's an 8-day event where you're doing 80 to 130 kilometers a day. When you're eating, it's not for today, you're eating for tomorrow. And you're constantly refueling your muscles, and you're playing a little game of calorie catch up to fuel you for the next day. So a typical day at the Epic in terms of my feeding schedule is I'd wake up at 5:30 and we would go into a dining marquee and I'd have a huge buffet size breakfast, and 7 o'clock we'd be on the bike, and every half an hour I would then eat a energy gel or bar to keep my energy stores up and have enzymes with that. So I'd be on the bike from 7 till, let's say, 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, constantly eating every half an hour. Get off the bike, straight away have a high protein smoothie, and then get a recovery meal from the race organizers. And after that, 2 hours later, you'd go for supper again at the dining marquee, have another huge buffet sized meal. You'd come afterwards to your tent, and then you'd start packing out all your food and your clothes for the next day. So constantly, it's all about fueling yourself and getting enough food in. And people would say to me, like, how did you do the Epic? And I'd literally say to them, I ate my way through it. I ate my way through the Epic bite by bite. So that cliche really does ring true here. Also, because of the issues of the malnutrition, because you don't absorb all your food, is one of the vitamins that you don't get is vitamin K. And this is responsible for clotting your blood, and it makes you have low platelet counts. Platelet counts, so you don't clot, your blood doesn't clot when you bleed. And my doctors were they were more concerned about me having a crash and having internal bleeding and having to be taken with helicopters and be rescued than anything else. That was their greatest concern. And also what happens is with these lung infections, the blood vessels in your lungs get irritated, and it causes them to start to stop bleeding, and you often cough up blood. And this did happen during the race, the Epic, but it's not a common occurrence for me to be training and then suddenly be coughing blood and someone wants to rush you to the hospital, but they kind of already got TB, they don't quite know what's going on. Also, you'll know that from driving on gravel roads when you pass an oncoming car. It often throws up some fine dust in the air, which lingers there for quite a while. For a good kilometer or so, then the air clears up and you can carry on driving. We found that this also affected me a lot in the preluding races that we did as training to the Epic. So all of the other bicycles around me and the cars and the support vehicles would also throw up the dust, and it would cause me to have aching lungs, and I'll be coughing constantly the whole day, and my voice would be hoarse. So what we did is we had one of those blue surgical masks, and then we sewed it into a buff. And whenever I'd go through a dusty patch, I would put the buff over my nose. And so I've been doing this whole COVID thing for quite a while. Yeah, the Epic, it's one of the most physically and mentally challenging things that I've ever done. It was the toughest week of my life. And it's difficult to explain how it affects you mentally, because simple tasks just seem like they're impossible, because you just don't have the mental capacity to have a congruent thought process of what you're actually doing. So you'd be putting on your shoes, and halfway through you'd forget what you're doing, and you'd be like, what am I doing? And you look down, and, oh right, my one shoe's on, so clearly I'm putting on my shoes. And I'd have these energy drops where you would just have absolutely nothing left, and you basically willing yourself to continue moving. And you'd be fighting back tears and fighting with your inner demons, just trying to keep on moving. And you would look at a bush down the road, and you would go, okay, there's a bush over there. All I have to do is get to that bush. And once you get to the bush, you just look at the next one, and you'd literally just keep going step by step, because you'd be in these situations where you are deep in this pain cave, this mental fortress of trying to get out this pain that you're in. And you'd sit there grinning and gritting your teeth for 4 hours, just hoping and waiting and knowing that as long as you keep eating and you keep moving, you will feel better. And while you're in these situations, you would do things to distract yourself. So I'd say little sayings like, it's not how hard you can get hit, but how hard you can hit and keep on moving. That's how winning is done. And you just repeat these silly things to keep you distracted from the pain, to just keep going. And yeah, and you'd be in so much pain, and you'd think back, why am I doing this? And then I would think, well, the purpose of why I'm doing it is to change the mindset of CF, but also, if I'm going through so much pain, I've been doing this for 3 days, 4 days already. If I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it all again. So I might as well just carry on and get some sort of reward for actually finishing. Yeah, I learned a lot about myself during this week. I learned a lot about how deep I could dig mentally and push myself past what I perceived to be my actual limits. And I remember coming down the finishing straight. We had a lot of family and friends who came to support, and they all wore orange in solidarity, and there's streamers going, and there was support banners, and we crossed the line, and everybody started tearing up, and there was this huge relief that we'd actually done it. And it was a very good feeling of, yes, we've accomplished something, but it was also a relief, and very much so for my parents, because for them, it was almost like their child that they had spent the past 20 years trying to get them to live their dream and live a positive life. But it's also a scary thing, because essentially they were sending me to war in a way, and it was kind of like putting me through something and not knowing what the outcome might be and what the effects would be afterwards. And I often think back to the day, and it's like, I can't believe we actually did it. Like, we actually finished the epic. It's like incomprehensible. Like, we actually finished the epic. It's like a world's first for cystic fibrosis. And it's just, you can't believe that it's something you actually did. And I was only 20. I was a little kid. Like, it's absolutely yeah, I'm still like taken aback at times and just thinking back to the memories. In 2010, I did the Argus for the first time with my dad. And he was dressed as Shrek and I was dressed as Noddy. That was our theme to do the Argus on a tandem bike. But the day before, we went to the registration. And I remember seeing this mannequin donned with a jersey on, a cycling jersey with an analog clock. And in the center was this large number 3, which signified a sub-3. So doing the race in under 3 hours. And this, in the cycling world, is a huge badge of honor. And it gives you quite a lot of gravitas and kudos to be able to say that you've done a sub-3. I don't know if there's any runners over here, but it's similar to a sub-4 minute mile or running at a pace of 2.5 minutes, which is pretty damn fast, but it's not impossible. And I said to my dad, hey, one day I'm going to do a sub-3. So I just told him that, and the next day we went as Noddy and Shrek to do the Argus. And he woke up that morning and he had food poisoning. So he was feeling pretty green. And we went and he piloted us around the peninsula. And because my dad was in front of me, they would obviously see my dad first. And they would go, "Go Shrek!" And I would then come into view a good while later. And we get these cheers of, "Go Shrek!" And Noddy. So it was, yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it, but it was obviously more to just achieve it and do the Argus for the first time and for the enjoyment of it. And I didn't think much of it. I thought this a once-off thing. You're Cape Townian, you're going to do it sometime. So we eventually got to Chapman's Peak, and I got over enthusiastically was saying to my dad, "Come, let's just race, like let's get in the guy's slipstream." And obviously, me being young, I like just assumed that my dad was feeling as good as me, and forgetting that he had food poisoning. So I'm saying, "Come, let's race," and he just pulls the brakes and gets off and starts walking. And he's like, "No, I'm done, I'm over with this whole thing." So we just, we sit down for a couple of minutes and then we regather our thoughts and we get back on the bike and we finish my first Argus. And we finished with over 6.5 hours with less than an hour to spare before cutoff, something very, very far off that sub-3 that I promised myself the day before. And I went back 2 years later and on my mom's steel bike and went and did it myself. And on Chapman's Peak, there was a holdup. And on the way home, I remember telling my dad in the car how frustrated I was that I didn't break the sub-4 because there was a holdup and like it's like beyond my control and I should have been able to do it. And he said to me, he's like, "You can be proud of what you did. I mean, it's a huge improvement from the year before. And many people with CF would actually be ecstatic with a time like that." So year after year, I went back to try and get closer and closer to that ever elusive sub-3 Argus. And then after the race was cancelled in 2017 because of the winds, I lost a lot of motivation to train and I was incredibly unfit. And I did a race with a friend and he was a lot fitter than me, even though I knew that I was actually a better cyclist than him based on when I was fit and we were both fit. But I did the race anyway. And in the first 5 kilometers on the very first hill, he sped away from me and he left me for like in the dust as if I'm just not there. And he made it into the first bunch and he was on the top 10 and he was going to be on the podium for the race. Unfortunately, he had a puncture And I caught up to him later, and we finished the race together. And I could have been pretty chuffed that, hey, I got a top 30 and I'm incredibly unfit. But I realized that I wasn't fulfilling my potential. And success, it isn't defined by how well you do against others, but how well you fulfill your own potential. There's a quote by Steve Prefontaine that's always struck a chord with me, which is, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. And I realized that I was sacrificing the gift of, well, firstly, my youth, relatively good health, and the time while I was at university to train. So what I did is, the next 9 months, I targeted doing a sub 3. And I put my training schedule together, and I chose that I'd do all the races that would help me improve my seeding or my start time. So the idea behind a start time is that you start with people of the same ability so you can work together and keep your average speed as high as possible. So I did a whole bunch of races, each time getting closer and closer to the start time of the pros. Eventually, I got to a pretty good seeding, and as the day came, I was on the start line next to the Castle of Good Hope in the 3rd group, and the racing tandems were starting a couple minutes behind me. And you could feel that there was this tension in the air. And there was really good conditions that day, and this tension was heightened because the previous year the race was cancelled because of the wind. And as the gun went off, when the sun rose, we hurtled down the M3, and we were like the swarm of frenzied bees humming past UCT. And I could feel this tension, or this almost excitement, like this twitchiness, or something off. And suddenly there was this huge crash, and there was just the screech of brakes and carbon and metal on metal, and this huge pileup. And I realized, like, my race could have been finished, like within a couple seconds, 9 months worth of training, and this was all gone. And we had only done like 20 Ks or so. Fortunately, I made it unscathed, and we were going up the climb of Smitswinkel. And as the road pitched skyward, so did the pace. And there was attack after attack trying to purposely drop people out of the group. And as the pace increased, I started going further and further and further back. And I knew that I had to stay with the bunch. I needed them to get the sub 3. It was not possible without them. It physically, mathematically, it was not possible, because you need them to keep that average speed. And I look back to see how many riders there were behind me. And I was the last rider. There was no one behind me. And I realized, like, this was it. Like, my sub 3 was literally hanging on whether I make it over the climb with the group or not. So I put my head down, and I gave it my all, and I just scraped over on the coattails of the group, just making it. And I looked at my Garmin to see our time, and I looked at this time split for where we should have been for my goal. And we were on target for 2 hours 50. So that's not that far off the winners. And I realized, like, I'm really punching above my weight, and I'm riding way, way above my potential. As we got into Noordhoek, there was another crash on a traffic island. And in the crash, I slammed on brakes so hard that my tire actually shifted inside the rim, causing the valve of the tube to break off. So I'd punctured, and it's quite ironic, because the night before, I was thinking to myself, do I not bring a tube and a pump, because, well, it's extra weight, and if I puncture, my sub 3's over anyway. There's no point in bringing it. And I just decided I'll bring it, because if I get a puncture, at least I can just finish the race and not be stranded somewhere. So I'm busy fixing the puncture, And I knew that there was the tandems a few minutes behind me. I said, okay, if I can make it with the tandems, I could possibly salvage some kind of sub 3. And there was a bystander. So I'm busy trying to fix this puncture, and they're busy relaying information on the road to me because I'm in panic stations because the clock is ticking, like telling me, okay, the first tandems come through, just letting me know what's happening. And then I realized that the rim tape had also shifted and was covering the hole where you put the tube in when I was fit to fix it. So then I'm freaking out, grabbing my Allen key and basically stabbing at this thing, trying to get this, like freaking out, changes as quick as possible. And I fixed it, and I realized, okay, either I go with my head and it's over mathematically, there's no point, just give up ride, or I can race with my heart on my sleeve and just give everything I've got and hold into this last glimmer of hope of this dream that I've had for 8 years. So I decided I'm going to go for it. And I knew that Chapman's Peak and Seikobosi was still to go, which is the toughest part of the race. And I completely buried myself for that last hour and crossed the finish line. And I had blurry vision. I started getting a coughing fit. And when I pulled out my asthma pump, the marshal started looking around, worrying, like, do we need medical attention? What's going on here? But I died 1,000 deaths. So, yeah, I think I can have some respite there. And after, I went to go sit with some friends afterwards. And one of the guys in the group of friends, he started in the same group as me. And he got a sub 3. He got a message on his phone saying, an SMS saying, oh, with his time. And I didn't get an SMS. So I started going through like, what's happening, and was there a glitch in the system? Did they not pick up my timing chip? I even went to go look at my bike. Did the chip fall off? And while I was doing this, he was busy looking on his phone and looking for the results. And he knew that I was going for a sub 3 and that I was wanting to get the sub 3 and be the first person with cystic fibrosis to get a August sub 3. And he handed me the phone, and I started thinking, was he the bearer of bad news, that he didn't want to read out my name and my time? He handed me the phone, and I completely burst out into tears. 8 years of dreaming and 9 months of training, and I was officially the first person with cystic fibrosis to finish the August and sub 3. And more importantly, I'd achieved the goal that I set myself when I was 15 years old, my very first August. I could officially call myself a cyclist. And in that moment, I realized that I had fulfilled my potential, and I wasn't sacrificing the gift because I gave my very, very best. And I was content, and it was this moment of absolute happiness and relief once again that I'd achieved this. And yeah, it was amazing. I just burst into tears, and I couldn't contain myself. It was a wonderful experience, and I really fought hard that day, but I feel that I deserved what I went through. It was, yeah, it was an amazing experience.
That's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
What I'd like to bring from this is, when you are in situations when you're having to choose between, do you go and follow your head or follow your heart, or you're in a situation where there's doubt and you don't know if you can do it, just think about, are you sacrificing the gift and by not giving it your best, and are you fulfilling your own potential?
Sure.
Thank you.
Amazing. Amazing, amazing. Wow, Jason, that is like, everybody is just like, that's an amazing inspirational story. That's just so needed to hear, like in a time where like everything is, at any time the story is so profound, but in a time where, I think people are particularly really in a very difficult and challenging time in the world. We need your stories. We need stories like you. And I mean, I think it would be really nice, because I'm sure a lot of people might be quite curious to maybe open this up and like, if you don't mind, maybe ask some personal questions.
Go for it. Really, it's
Yeah,
open
so
book. I
please,
don't feel that
you
there's
know,
anything that is out of bounds. Like, I'm very open about it. I know it is a personal journey or condition, but really rather ask and then not. It's, yeah, I'm an open book.
I think that's amazing. And Annalise just said a remarkable human being, a remarkable story, and thank you so much. So I ask all of you to unmute yourself and ask some questions, or maybe you have some comments just about, you know, listening to a story like that. What has it brought up for you? This is a really relaxed platform. This isn't formal at all. So Andre, I'm pleased you could join. So thanks for joining again. So who wants to just start off and maybe just ask Jason something, having heard his story? Any thoughts on it? Let me see who is here. Mela. Mela says, well done, and inspiration, amazing. And Mo and Rob, amazing, inspiring journey, Jason. Oh, okay, so they want to go, what's next for you? That's.
I'm glad you asked. My next challenge is to do an Everesting attempt. Not the one that you think of with climbing Mount Everest. It's Everesting on a bicycle. So the idea is that you cycle the height of Everest. So you pick any hill and you cycle multiple repeats until you get the accumulated height of Everest. So that is basically 9 vertical kilometers. It's you're not allowed to. It's one activity, so you can't stop and carry on the next day. You have to do it continually. You're not allowed to sleep, which is going to be the most difficult. And usually there's no time limit, but what's made it a little bit more challenging for me is that there's another guy with the same condition, cystic fibrosis, who has done the attempt in Germany during lockdown. So initially it was just going to be to do it, to achieve it. So now I've got a time limit that I'm going to have to go for, which makes it incredibly difficult, because you have to have a much steeper hill to get as much elevation as possible in the time limit. Yeah, so it makes things a lot more challenging instead of being able to rest. Yeah, so it's pretty much, I'm going to be time trialing with the clock, and all my breaks going to be, okay, clock watch started, okay, you can go now, which I'm planning to do towards the end of the year or early January. Wow.
That's amazing. So can I ask, you know, when you do something like that, there must be like a whole medical team that is with you on that. Is that true? Or, you know, how is it monitored for safety?
Well, you obviously, a lot of people do it by themselves. But it's not advised. They do say always have a support team, because if something goes wrong, especially because you can't sleep. So the longer it goes on, you become quite delirious, and the chance of you crashing is incredibly high. There was actually some friends of mine did it recently, and while the girl was going down, she hit a rabbit and she fell. Another friend of mine had low blood pressure. So things do happen. Yeah. I would probably have somebody on hand who has medical experience, but I have cleared it with my doctor beforehand, that this is what I'm training for. And same with the Epic, you had to get a doctor's medical clearance before you could participate for liability reasons.
I mean, your story is remarkable. That you know, a person who doesn't have CF And this is a huge accomplishment. I mean, you have to be, a normal person would have to be, I mean, whatever normal is, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So incredibly fit. And then you go with this intense condition and nothing stops you. I mean, what drives you and keeps you so motivated? You know, if you were to kind of give advice to, say, teenagers, maybe that's an age group that could really do with a little bit of motivation. I mean, we all could, but you know, what would you say?
What's very important is to have the why you want to do it, not just, okay, I'm going to do this, but know the why. Because when you get to those dark moments where you have to pull on your inner strength, that's what's going to get you through. And it's that why, and also putting a plan in place, like this is going to happen. And so you give yourself that accountability of, well, I don't have the choice to back out because I've committed to this. And also because within training, you'll have your weekly planning of how much training you're going to do. And before the week, you plan, okay, on this day, I'm going to do this amount of hours, this amount of hours. So you don't have to think. You must eliminate all the excuses of why why you can't do it. So you kind of like, oh, it's already decided. This is what's happening. So that's the advice that I definitely give is write it down, set a date, and make a plan. And once you have the plan, it makes you accountable, and you very much can't back down because and you're holding yourself. It's not just something that, even if it's something you're not putting out in public, but you're doing it for you. And that's very much important for why. And I think partially that's why a lot of people, when they do these sort of things, they want to, not only because of the charitable aspect of it for doing good, but it also drives them because they're doing it for something greater than themselves. And that contributes to that why. And it gives you almost a sense of it's something greater than yourself, and you're suffering, but through your suffering, you making someone else suffer less.
Yeah, I must agree with you. You know, I think when, I don't know if you know the work of Simon Sinek. He's a great teacher, and he has the book, The Why Theory. But when you do something beyond yourself, you make it bigger than yourself. There's such a driving force that that definitely can be such a wonderful motivator. So I think you've really tapped in and mentioned something that's really important, because it almost, we all have our own personal achievements, and it's governed by our ego. But when you take the small I out of the equation and you realize how much bigger, and your thing was really about sort of helping people understand what is possible despite the challenges, and changing the mindset of CF.
Yes. That was essentially the mission. That was more important to us than finishing or anything like that. I mean, obviously, we were planning on finishing, and we had many contingency plans of how we're going to get ourselves out of situations. But what we did is that was the crux of the entire campaign, was to change the mindset of people with CF because of the negative connotation, but not only the people with CF or conditions, of any condition or any challenge, it was also the doctors, because there were many doctors that, like Philip Stad, who had a similar view of it cannot be done. I've come across other people who have been told by their doctors, you might as well give up living. It's over. And that it's having that negative energy, it's not good for you, and it's not going to help you excel.
Yeah.
It's not going to help you to live beyond full your own potential or chase your dreams. and that was the entire reason. And as I mentioned earlier, we managed to change the slogan of the Cystic Fibrosis Association, which essentially shows that we accomplished our mission.
Yeah.
And that, for me, says a lot more about our efforts in our campaign more than anything else. And they actually weren't too happy about supporting us, because they had a very similar mindset where they felt that it wasn't going to happen, and they didn't want to be liable if I were to become sick after the race, which is understandable, but also putting their name behind it. But it had that same sort of negative connotations, instead of like, oh, it can't be done, it's not going to happen, you're going to get sick afterwards, instead of saying, hey, go for it. If you do it, how great will it be? It'll be change many people's views of themselves and their own limitations and their own abilities, and look forward to, let's breathe in life with this and create something positive instead of negative.
Yeah, I know, I agree with you 100%. The mindset, I find if we can and find ways of how to train the mindset to think positively, that's 50% of how I think people heal. And it's so important how you think. You know, often I've heard when people have been, say, diagnosed with hectic health conditions, or is, you know, you would hear someone say, oh, but that person was so fit or ate healthily. But, you know, often I've said, well, how have they thought? And your thoughts really direct how your body can achieve things beyond what is possible, how it can boost the immune system. So it's that collaborating of thought and you know, the mental body and the physical body. So, you know, again, I want to ask you, like, how would you, what training or what advice would you give to people? Like, how do you practice positive thought? Because I know that goes through ebbs and flows, and here we are in a difficult time where, you know, everybody had lockdown, and I had some friends that were really struggling with, like, suddenly they thought they were positive, but really had to deal with the loneliness of it. You know, just generally speaking, what would you say is a really good thing to work at positive mindsets?
What I can speak in terms of how we did it in preparation for the epic in particular. So what I did beforehand is there's a magazine cover that I got from a previous epic with another guy, Barry Stander, who's a South African winner. And on the cover of the magazine, he's crossing the line in the yellow jersey, holding his partner's hand. And what I did is I cut out that magazine cover, and I put a photo of my face over his face.
Brilliant.
And whenever I'd see that photo, I would visualize myself finishing on the finish line. And I did this for 3 months or so before the race. And I would always visualize myself getting there, or being at the finish line and achieving my goal. So it was that it's visualizing where you want to be, and I wouldn't say the rest will follow, but it's very much that's where you want to be, and you make a plan to get there. A lot of the time, it's setting the train tracks to the destination, and then you're on the train going there.
Yeah.
If you understand that analogy.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Definitely, visualizations are powerful. They are so powerful. It's definitely something I've used often, and just creating an image, and then you know starting with, like, okay, you had a goal, had an image, and then you took and found an image, a physical image that you could look at, and that practice of seeing it every day, I think is an excellent little bit of advice.
And another aspect of positive thought is that when I was doing all those races leading up to the Argus to improve the seeding, I was racing the one race, it was by fluke that it was on the same day as the provincial champs. So a lot of the professionals were there and not in the race. So I started in the first group with the pros. And before that, I did a lot of races that were hill climbs. And that's obviously the most difficult part of racing, is going up the hill. And there's this very steep hill in Durbanville, Fister's Hook. But anyway, when we were going up there, I could see that they were dropping me, but I kept on thinking, hey, and like reaffirming this affirmation, like, hey, you've achieved that, you've deserved to be here, you've done the hill climbs, you've put in the work, this is where you're meant to be. And as soon as I changed that, my perception of what I'm going through and where I should be, it no longer became about the physical pain, but it was more about, I'm in the right place, this is right, and I'm going forward and I'm not going backwards. So it does play a very big, that sports psychology, or psychology in general, it does very much play a role in your view of the situation to get through difficult situations.
Yeah. I've often said, like a small little example, it just makes me think, I teach yoga, and I've had a lot of students over the years, or clients, and they'll have an injury, or they have an area that's, an injury. And I say to them, where you put your attention is where you get attention, as cliched as that is. But you literally move into, okay, I'm thinking about my neck. I hurt my neck. My neck is so, and then they have a dialogue that goes on. Yours is a lot more extreme, and so I'm really simplifying it. But there literally has to be sort of have to pull them back into, your neck is sore, but actually your arms seem fine, your torso is fine, your legs are working quite nicely, those feet and your toes, and you've got to literally drive the mind into an area of possibility. And the practice of physically just moving it to what is possible, as opposed to working or keep on drawing it towards an area of challenge. So you taking your mind to the bigger picture of why you were doing this, was really such a driving, motivating factor, which is amazing that you've shared that. And there was Mila, are you still on? I can see her profile pictures on, and she had such a lovely question. Do you want to ask it personally, or are you going to make me read it out? Okay. She's going to make me read it out. So Mila says, so, hi, Jason, what does your twin sister feel about you pushing yourself so much? Does she also have these challenges with you? Does she also do these challenges with you?
With me? No, she doesn't. So my twin sister, she has always been very protective over me growing up, and also because us being twins, she kind of felt that it was her job to look after me. In a way, it was like she's the I wouldn't say the motherly figure, but like she has to look out for a little brother.
Yeah.
And I think that did affect her a lot growing up, for sure. But also in a way, it gave her purpose, in a way it was good because it gave her purpose, but I don't think it was good in the long run, because you have to develop as your own individual and your own person. So once she moved out of Cape Town at varsity, it was very good that we became two different separate people. And no, she doesn't do any sport with me. Sport's not her strong point, but she does enjoy the odd water ski here and there. So she's got other interests.
Okay. It's interesting. So she kind of took on that role, felt the need of taking on the role of the caregiver, hey?
Yeah. I mean, it's so, with the condition, it's because it's genetic, she doesn't, yeah, obviously there's a chance that she could have had it, but she doesn't necessarily mean that she's completely free of the condition, because she could be a carrier. And if her husband were to be a carrier and they would have a child, then there's a possibility that their child could also have CF.
Yeah.
Because it's the genetic, you have to have 2 genes from both parents to get the condition.
Okay. And I mean, I hear your story, and it's evident that you got really a lot of, you know, how your parents chose to manage your condition was
Absolutely
very beneficial to acquiring a positive attitude, and not moving into that victimization mentality.
Yeah, they they were exceptional at making sure that I focused on the positive, and it was kind of on a need to know basis. So when I met Peter that time, it was because I got a bacterial lung infection for the first time, which is quite a severe thing. It's one of the things that you are constantly looking out to prevent. And it was like, I needed to know that things are, things are getting serious. And it wasn't like, we're going to dump all of this you while you're young and you have to live with this. It was, when you need to know and you're old enough, you'll learn about it. And I never had this feeling that I didn't know, or I didn't, or I needed to know more. I mean, Google was there, and I never researched what cystic fibrosis was. And it's because I never had felt the need that I needed to know. I was managing it fine. I was living, and I was living a full life. It wasn't like I was in a situation where I wasn't given enough information. But obviously, as different challenges arose and different people with the condition experienced it slightly differently, and I'm sure as they experience those challenges, they would be informed of what they need to know. Similarly, like when you, let's say, for example, you have a cough, you don't suddenly say, oh, okay, you have a cough, but this could happen, and it'll relate to that you'll get pneumonia, and this can happen, you need a lung transplant, then you're going to die. So it's as a child needs to know, you let them know what they need to be able to get through it.
You bring up an important point, though, because, you know, as a child and even as adults, you know, because we have access, I think there's a line between useful information and too much information. And Dr. Google can be very confusing, and self-medicating or self-analyzing also can be, like you say, you know, you can have a cough, you can have a pain, and then going into Google and the possibilities are overwhelming. I found it was the thing that I had to just really take a step back from when I was sick a couple of years ago. So there is that balance, just what you're saying, you know, and I think I love that you shared that, because it wasn't like it was a choice. You were born with this. That's quite a different thing, you know. So it was your parents' management, how you chose to receive that information as well, but really having that foundation of kind of being guided, and you obviously have a fairly active family, your dad having raced with you, which is also so important, I think, to not get sedentary in our lives, you know, to acknowledge for however long, you know, wherever we're at, to acknowledge this human form we're in, and actually just love being in it, you know, with warts and all. It was something that really I thought was very important, lesson that came to me a few years ago.
When I mean, fortunately, when I was younger, I absolutely fell in love with sport from a young age. So I was that annoying kid who got competitive over a game of tiddlywinks. So I was, I'd play sport all the time, and without actually realizing it was good for me.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I'm doing this to clear my lungs or as a chore, or like I have to do this, but it's because I loved it and I enjoyed it. And I think that's a very good or very important way of the same, going back to that, the psychology behind it is, if you can change something that you don't like into something that you do like, it doesn't feel like it's something horrible. I mean, and you want to do more of it. So yeah, I mean, I mean, cycling is a very brutal sport to go and ride up a mountain as hard as you can, and until you blue in the face and you got your vision blurred and you can taste blood in your mouth. It doesn't sound fun at all.
No.
But for some reason,
terrible.
for some reason you go out and you do it again the next day. It's like, why? But it's changing looking at the great endorphins you get afterwards and saying, okay, that's what I enjoy and that's why I do it.
It's definitely, if we all have the ability to walk on our legs, stand up straight, it's that thing of find something you love doing, an activity, a physical activity. Yours is extreme, and like, hats off. I mean, I would completely am blown away I couldn't even consider getting onto a bike, because I did once, and I just drove really slowly. I pedaled into a wall and then fell off, and I never got back on again. But love doing something with your body physically, even if it's just, and that love that you have.
Yeah, like your physical outlet is yoga, and that's your expression of your physical self and your endorphins that you get.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see. I see there's a little chat somewhere. Andre, yes. Pleasure.
First of all, thanks, Elaine. I'm so sorry I was late. Life happens.
We're happy.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say one thing about the Dr. Google. Dr. Google can really make you die, because if someone like Jason listened to Google, I think he would have given up 20 years ago. And the reality is, but for those of you who don't know, Jason's a very humble guy. I met him a few years ago. I was working on I'm nearly 3 times your age, Jason. So it's amazing for me to have a young guy like you and use you as a role model. And one of the things I love about Jason is he just gets on with life. I don't know if he's told you guys, but he's got a degree. He's an incredibly intelligent guy. He's very well liked by everybody. And when we did the COVID thing, I was busy presenting a course for professional speakers. He's been sort of adamant that he wants to be a speaker at some stage, and I think from what you've seen tonight, he's going to be an absolute hit. But in the middle of the course, he was sitting there the one day and doing the course, and it's fairly intensive. It's about 4 hours at a session, and everyone looked at him and said, "Jason, where are you?" And he was in Grooteskier, and he got sick. And he was doing the course from his hospital bed with all the plugs and the wires and the drips and things sticking out of him. And we were like, are you crazy? And not only that, but if I remember correctly, Jason, you were with some sort of fancy wind door, the door away from the COVID unit. So every time they opened the doors, this thing had like a suction thing which would keep the COVID gases this side. And here's this kid with a lung condition. And he gave presentations on a number of occasions, and he even went with me to a Toastmasters meeting. And only halfway through did the people realize he was actually lying in a hospital bed. This was in the middle of COVID. And the number of times, Jason, I've heard you speak where you've run out of air because the fluid is built up, that he's speaking and suddenly he gets this very Liam Neeson voice, sort of he starts going deeper and deeper. Never once has he actually stood up and said to me, "Andre, can I be excused for today? Can I be sort of bypassed?" Other people give me excuses. They had their ladies thing last week and can they miss their course and stuff like that. He's never done that to me. He just goes and goes and goes. So I have no doubt, Jason, that you're going to be a huge success in whatever you do. And you really, for a young dude, I really admire you. You're an amazing
Thanks.
man.
Thank you very much, Andre. Thank you. It means a lot.
Jeez, that's
Yeah,
remarkable. I mean, humility is, thank you for sharing that, Andre, because we wouldn't have known that. That's astounding. Astounding. I just love that. I mean, and I just also, I think it you know, if it's just confirmation again of when you are driven by something beyond yourself, when it's bigger than you, this is what you are sharing. Like the gift of what you're doing is so important, which is why maybe I phoned. I was like, don't you worry about what you're going to say. It's you have this remarkable story. It just needs to be heard. So
Elaine, one thing that you can do for Jason
yes,
is, and he doesn't know this yet, but when he does his Everest thing, I'd love it if you can sort of turn your social media powers and let's go watch him, because I'm sure we can do something on the day where we can film clips. We did one for some ladies the other day who did the Everest thing. And what we did is sort of every hour on Instagram, we did Instagram stories, and maybe use your power of your network, just so we can follow him and see what it is, because it's going to be a long trip. And I've seen Neela theirs as well. Maybe she can use the power of her fairly extensive social media as well to support Jason on the day, even if it's just morally. Just to sort of,
and I would
yell out wishes and things to him.
That's a brilliant idea, Andre. And then Jason, you send me all the details, you know, the date and whatever, and how people can get hold of you. And while I've still got a couple of you on, please, I've got a Instagram Conversations in the Kitchen page. Please go and follow me. The more you follow, the more we can grow this community and help each other with inspiring stories. So it's new. There are a couple of speakers who are sharing. Those of you who are visiting, I would love you to be brave enough and just send me, if you don't have my WhatsApp and you don't get regular things, Andre, I'm going to ask you, because you're not a shy dude. I want you to send me a little WhatsApp of like 40 seconds. You've been on Conversations in the Kitchen and what you think. And if you don't think of it very well, you wouldn't still be on, and then just don't send me that WhatsApp. It would be a bad idea.
Also, I mean, I'll put my contact details on the chat, and I'll send them to you, Elaine, as well. But if you enjoy the talk, please go onto my Facebook page, Jason van Slot, cyclist/speaker. And so you look in the bottom corner, you can see that's how my surname's spelt. It's kind of funny, but I'll put the link there. And just give me a review if you enjoyed it, and just a couple sentence or two if you enjoyed it. It'll help me, give more opportunities to share my story and hopefully impact other people's lives like you enjoyed my story, and it obviously impacted you if you felt that it was worth talking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I don't know if you put anything in the chat while people maybe write it down. You're going to send me a WhatsApp, and I'm going to, all of you, there are a couple of you, like Anne Wallace, if you want to hear more stories and you want updated, like, please, my WhatsApp number, either give me your cell phone number and I'll send you notifications. All of you that I'm seeing, I know get regular ones from me, and I want you to share them with your friends. Jason's just going to put in his details in the chat, and then Friday morning, I send you all an update, how to get hold of who's spoken, so how you get hold of Jason, sending a little bit of a review, and keep his story going, because it's so incredibly inspiring. I'm going to ask someone who's really good at this. Can someone put down who's here? And I need my phone number put down, and I forget how to do that. I only see my phone number put down to everybody who's good with the Zoom thing. Anyone volunteering? Let's see. Jason, okay, Jason is there. To everybody, hold on. There, I've got it. I figured it out. So I'm going to put my cell phone number. I was really not of the age where I learned how to type, so I'm really bad at it. And there's a fallacy that we can multitask, as I've learned. That is my name, that is my number. Okay, so take that down if you don't get regular WhatsApps. There we go. And okay, so Jason's Instagram is at Jason Funslot. Yes, cyclist speaker. And there we go. Thank you, Jace, for that.
I mean, through there you can follow the Everesting journey. We're going to try and make it public, or that people can join the race, or not the race, but the ride with us, and see how many meters or how close we get to Everest. And obviously we're gonna try and make it quite big and get a donations going for charity, and create a cause out of it, and create a greater purpose and a why to the whole event.
Jason, do you have an idea how long it's going to take you?
I don't actually know. I'm wanting to go under 16 hours. I know Tegan, she did 16:52, so that's basically 17 hours.
She there were two provincial athletes, but female provincial athletes, and they did it just under 16 hours.
Yeah.
So my gut response is you probably should be round about there.
Yeah, that's the goal. Just under 60. I know the record for cystic fibrosis is, I think it's 17 something. But I'm wanting to obviously, I don't want to just break it by 2 minutes. Like, I'm wanting to put a decent, so I don't have to do it again.
It's a fascinating concept, Elaine, in terms of breaking the Everest record, because they don't count downhill time.
Yeah.
So what happens is that you only get counted on the uphills.
Oh, wow.
And here's the secret about it. So obviously, if you choose an incredibly steep mountain, it'll take you less time, but it'll destroy you physically. And if you choose a nice, long, gradual uphill, it'll take you longer to come down, and you won't climb height very quickly. So these girls the other day, I don't know if those of you know it in Manus, they chose the rotary road, which is that viewpoint. So they started at the bottom of Manus, and they went to that viewpoint at the top of Manus, and they went down. And Jason, I think they did it 56 times.
Yeah.
That was a very steep one, personally. So you can pick the steepest road, but it'll destroy your legs.
Yeah, it gets quite. Yeah, it gets very technical, because you can't just pick any hill. Like, you want a hill that's relatively straight, so you don't have to brake on the way down, and you can just get down and go back up again. And there's also, obviously in Cape Town, you've got to think about, the wind. So you want the southeaster with you. I went up Steenbras, going up to the dam in Gordons Bay last weekend, and there was a northwester, and I did 2 laps, and afterwards I was like, I'm definitely not doing this into the wind. I was actually riding behind the car to shelter me, because the wind was so strong, it was blowing me across the road. So it is quite a science to get your exact.
About 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Jamie Murray. Elaine, sorry for me for just pushing in.
No, I love this. This is it.
He's very much regarded as one of the fittest men in the world. In fact, he holds 2 world records. He ran up and down Table Mountain 22 times in 24 hours. And then a few months later, he broke the record running Lion's Head 12 times in 12 hours. And so that's also a phenomenal story. But he tried to do the Everest thing the other day, but he wanted to try it when nobody had done it to him before. So he tried for location. So he did it in the Kariga Game Reserve, where Tandi, the rhino, is the only rhino who's ever survived from having her face chopped off. And he did it there, but the hill wasn't very steep. And so it took him 36 hours to do the 9,500 meters uphill. And he said that was also horrendous, because he was actually hallucinating towards the end. So you can do a nice gradual hill, but it will eat you alive. So yeah, interesting. Just out of interest, this guy Jamie was telling me a story the other day on the radio. He can run up Lion's Head in about 21 minutes.
Wow.
So any of you that have climbed Lion's Head. So he said he had to see how many times he could run up and down. So he ran up and did it in 21 minutes, came down a bit slower. The second time he went up, it was like 30 minutes. And he said every attempt he made, he got slower and slower. And so attempt number 11 took him nearly an hour to climb. And he came down and he suddenly realized he had only 25 minutes left. 25 minutes left to break the record. But his last attempt had taken him an hour. And like a little bit like Jason, he just switched into what he called beast mode. And he ran up Lion's Head in 17 minutes, which broke all his previous records that he'd ever tried in his life. Wow. After having run for 12 hours. So great. I'm mixed with these guys. They're crazy. Look at me.
That's amazing.
You know, they're like weirdos.
Jason, how did you train for the sleep deprivation beforehand? What is your plan?
Sleep the night before. No, unfortunately, that's one thing you can't really train for, and also it's not, it's not the healthiest. So hopefully it'll under 16 hours. You can go, you can go for sleep without 16, not comfortably, but okay. So there's no actual training that I'll do, but I will do long rides to simulate being tired and doing many hours and still having to carry on going. So it's not the actual like let's not sleep for a week and then go ride, because it's also with my condition, it's very much I have to take into consideration my recovery and getting sick. Yeah. So that's something that I do struggle a lot compared to some of the other people that I do race against, where they can sometimes do a very hard effort or race and then a couple of days later they'll be fine, whereas for me I can't repeat that over and over and over. Which also makes the epic quite more of an achievement that I don't recover as well.
So how many weeks to go before you do this?
The thing of my training program starts or ends at the 7th of December, but it's luckily, because it's not an event or anything, you can push it out a little bit. So it'll be most likely a little bit 2 weeks later or in January after the holidays. My dad's going away in December, so I would like him to be there. So it'll either be in before he goes or after. So early December or early January.
Okay. Amazing. You've got to just stay in contact with me, and so that we can sort of just keep you boosted with enthusiasm as you've inspired us this evening. So that has just been amazing. Is there anybody else who wants to just add a last few comments or just questions while Jason is still here? I know there are some sports enthusiasts in the house who are, I think, had a long day. Derek is one of them, and he's a very sporty dude. John, I know, enjoys cycling. You take it to a level that's almost unpronounceable though, Jason. Let me see. So I'm just going to, just last little bit of like ending off, Jason, I would like to extend this to you, along with supporting whatever it is that you are moving forward with and you're going to continue. I want to be able to help kind of just grow the platform for you. And please invite you to come back. Again, I'd love you to come back and chat in the kitchen again. We want to keep on hearing your story and where you've moved. And, regardless of what happens with the Everest, the mere fact that you are going to participate is bloody marvelous. So, like, hats off to you. And just a big, big thank you for coming to my kitchen and
No,
sharing
thank
the
you.
story. I mean, it's inconceivable for me to even consider getting onto a bicycle, riding on a mountain, on a flat road. So, and I know for the average person, your feats are incredible. So yeah, thank you for just being so humble and open. And come back and visit us soon.
No, I will definitely. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my story, and yeah, I've enjoyed it, and it's it's nice to just share stories and yeah, have a nice conversation about life.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the kitchen is a place where you can just sit and care. It's the visiting station. You know, it's where people get together, where families get together, and you know, all the frills and fusses can just be dropped. And you know, while we've chatted in between, I've a lot of people that are still on. I've got, thanks to you. I will send you the chat update, but Mila just said thank you so much, and so inspirational. Quite a few others as well. So yeah, keep on tuning in and keep up the good work and look after yourself, Jason. And yeah, I look forward to having you visit again. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in.
Cheers, man.